Welcome to Horror or Not with Josh Lee as part of our Horror Not Fear campaign going until June of 2021. Josh will be discussing the films that are argued if they're actually horror movies, either by audience members, critics, or the studios themselves. Now join Josh as he talks about this week's movies. Okay, thank you for joining us again for Bloodhound Pix, the podcast. I am Craig.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Josh.
Now, this is a little special segment as part of our Horror Not Fear campaign, where Josh will be, you guys voted and picked a movie, and Josh will be doing a segment called Horror or Not, where he discusses the films that kind of fans or audiences or people like that will debate that, or even the studios themselves will say that it's not horror because of certain reasoning. Sometimes is it to make it more esteemed or prestigious to sell for the Academy Awards, or is it too much of a comedy? Whatever it may be, it's debatable. So the first two that we kind of have are Silence of the Lambs and Seven. So, Josh, whenever you feel like going.
Okay. So I'll just go ahead and get it out of the way right off the bat. Both Silence of the Lambs and Seven are, in fact, horror films. The Academy would never agree with that statement, especially considering Silence of the Lambs back in, 91? It swept the fucking stupid Oscars, and it was, a thriller, a psychological police drama, some bullshit like that. Because everyone knows that the Academy doesn't ever even say the word horror. But I've got news for those bourgeois fucks. Silence of the Lambs is a horror film. Let's just state the obvious. You have the Buffalo Bill character. We'll start with him, Jamie Gum. He literally fashions skin suits from people he murders. That's very reminiscent of another psychopath by the name of Leatherface, I believe. And are you going to tell me that the films that Leatherface is in is not horror? I didn't think so. In terms of, you also have Hannibal Lecter, who kind of acts more as a protagonist than he does an antagonist. But that doesn't mean that he's not completely fucking nuts. And more or less, you have two monster type characters in Lecter and Buffalo Bill. And that to me kind of always is reminiscent of like the Universal like Versus films, even from Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, shit like that. And the two characters are so almost not human in their their fucked upness. And I guess that it kind of leads into the discussion of Seven, in that Seven and Silence of the Lambs actually are very similar films. They're in no way the same, but they are very similar in that, you want to call it a police procedural. Okay, I guess that fits. But Seven is also a motherfucking horror film, and I've got a good story as to why. In case you don't want to just admit it through watching it, the writer of Seven is Andrew Kevin Walker. Okay, I met Andrew in Austin in 2018, and in fact, where I met him, he was doing a class, a segment at the film festival on the horror film, and he's hilarious, and he is a giant horror fan. In fact, one of the things that he continually made mention of is that he wrote Brain Scan, and he would much rather talk about Brain Scan than Seven. Seven is a horror film, and I think David Fincher might be the reason that people want to say that it's not, because I don't think he necessarily likes horror. But that's a bunch of bullshit. So, yes, both Silence of the Lambs and Seven are horror movies, and hopefully, if you weren't convinced already, you are now. And fuck what the Academy says. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have any movies that you want to suggest to Josh, I know there's also the topic of elevated horror. That has been a new term that we can have him discuss on that.
I definitely want to get into that.
So if you have certain movies that fit into the category of horror or not, send them our way. And we'll be holding another poll, I think, probably this week.
Yes. All right.
Nice.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is produced by Josh Lee, Craig Dram, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Audio editing by Kyle Hintz.